Thank you, Governor Polis. It's an honor to serve alongside you, and I'm looking forward to an exciting year as we work together. Now, I'm going to do something that will make my staff nervous and that I probably shouldn't do. I'm going to step away from my notes if that's okay, and hopefully this microphone is working. I get an opportunity, of course, to share a little bit about my initiative, but I can't say enough about the important work of Phil and Tammy Murphy around youth mental health and infant and maternal health as well. It's a message for our time, one of the most important issues we can work on, and a place where we need to find real solutions. Let me back up a little bit. Over the past 10 plus days or so, Abby and I have had an amazing journey. Of course, we celebrated the 4th of July Independence Day like many of you in your hometowns with, I'm sure, amazing events. Then we had an opportunity to go to our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and then we spent some time in Gettysburg with Braver Angels. You'll hear a little bit more about that organization momentarily. And then we had a little free time, and we went to Philadelphia, to the place where it all began. And we went to Independence Hall and Congress Hall, and we saw the Liberty Bell, and we went to we saw where Washington crossed the Delaware and where his troops camped, of course, at Valley Forge, and this was just a real emotional and amazing week for us, and we read the words of our founding fathers and Abraham Lincoln, who helped hold our nation together during the worst epic of our time. And as we were reading, there were some, I want to share just a couple quotes that stood out to me. Abby is a bicentennial baby. She was born in 1976. She was named after Abigail Adams, and so we're big fans of the Adams family. There was a letter to Abigail that of course, her husband sent on July 2nd, which he thought was going to be the big celebration. He was close. But in this letter, he said, "I am well aware of the toll and blood and treasure it will cost us to maintain this Declaration of Independence and support and defend these states. Yet through all the gloom, I can see the rays of ravishing light and glory. I can see that the end is worth all the means. This is our day of deliverance." Now, of course, John Adams and Abigail Adams and so many more understood a little bit about the toil and blood that it was going to take to create this nation and preserve it a nation. They understood the sacrifice, the work, the real work that Governor Polis mentioned that Americans would have to do to accomplish this great task to create the greatest nation in the history of the world. He went on to say this, though: "With solemn acts of devotion to God, we ought to commemorate it with pomp and parade, with shows, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations from one end of the continent to the other, from this time forevermore forward." Now, we've done that. Again, the 4th of July, I hope you all celebrated. I think if John Adams were here, he would love what we do on the 4th of July, right? We have concerts and games, and we've gotten really good at blowing stuff up. Like it's amazing. Our fireworks shows, you can get a great deal on a mattress. I mean, what more could John Adams have wanted, right? We're good at that. I'm not as sure, though, that John and George Washington and Hamilton and others would be as excited with us when it comes to the blood and toil part of preserving this nation, the sacrifices that it takes. You see, they warned of these things. They warned of this divide that we're seeing in our country right now. John Adams, in several letters, was very clear that if we're not careful, he talked about the importance of humility. He talked about the importance of removing division in our country, that those are the things that could tear us apart. He said, in fact, if you don't have the political virtues of patience and humility and kindness, that all of us become what he referred to as ravenous beasts, which I think 250 years later is a great description for the political class in America right now, and so many of us on social media. We've turned into this worst version of ourselves, ravenous beasts. There were other warnings, of course. Hamilton and Madison, when talking about the forming of the Constitution, referred directly to these virtues, the virtues in the Constitution of political moderation, as they referred to it. talking of the other side of this, kind of the worst angels, the lack of political moderation that led to a real selfishness and a divisiveness that they had seen throughout the country. But probably no one more than George Washington warned about division in our country and what would happen if political factions tore us apart. He said something that I think is that is really important. If I can find it here, I know I have it here somewhere. He talked about the importance of bringing us together. In fact, he said this. I promise I have it. George Washington said this. Conspiring people that tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection, right? He was talking to Americans. We ought to be bound by fraternal affection. And yet, again, here we are 250 years later, almost 250 years later, and we're seeing that faction that has pulled us apart. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't think I'm prone to hyperbole. I don't tend to be. But as I was in Gettysburg, and I was there on the battlefield, and I was looking at what was the unthinkable that became reality throughout the 1850s and, of course, heading into the 1860s. And I couldn't help but think that the course that we are on right now as Americans is unsustainable in an increasingly fragile democracy. That we can't long remain a United States if this continues. And of course, the true blood and toil and treasure it took at that time to hold us together and to bring us back together. I truly believe that all of the issues, pick your issue as a Republican or a Democrat, I don't care what your issue is. It may be immigration. Today we learned about the incredible dangers of fentanyl in our country. It might be energy policy. It might be mental health. Whatever your issue is, I am here to tell you that we cannot solve that issue if we remain as divided as we are today. I believe this issue of toxic division, of unhealthy conflict, rises above all the other issues. And I'll go even one step further, and I don't need to go there because 18 months ago, those of us that were together listened to the Swiss ambassador, Ambassador Pitelud, who talked to us so eloquently about how over the past 100 years, the United States of America, again, the greatest country in the history of the world, has been the leader for freedom across the globe. That whenever there was a dark cloud on the horizon, a dictator who wanted to destroy civilization as we know it, it was the United States to which every other country in the world looked to for leadership. And then, of course, he expressed his concern, shared by so many around the world, that they're losing that leader because we're too busy fighting on Twitter about stuff that doesn't matter. Now, we do live in the greatest nation in the history of the world because we're a nation that was founded on an idea. This idea, profound, radical, that all of us are created equal and that we are endowed from on high certain inalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And an idea that changed the course of history and that brought us together from all different walks of life. This promise of equality, this promise of rights. But with the selfishness of those rights comes the selflessness of responsibility that we all have as members of this great nation to help preserve the Union. Now, if that is going to happen, I believe that there is one group that can help us remember who we are and why we are. And it's you, my fellow governors. As Frank Luntz said, called us the last adults in the room in politics. I truly believe that if we are ever going to find our better angels again, it has to start with us. It has to start with us setting the example of how to disagree better, hence the name of my initiative. Disagree better. You see, let me tell you what this is not, okay? This is not just another civility initiative. And by the way, we need that. This is not just about being kind and nice to each other, this fluffy stuff that is really important. The fluffy stuff is important, don't get me wrong, but that is not this. You see, our nation was founded on profound disagreement, healthy disagreement. I want us to disagree. Jared and I are going to disagree on lots of things. Okay? Phil and I disagree on lots of policy issues. But there's a right way to do that and a wrong way to do it. We can disagree without hating each other. We can look to build others and not tear each other down. There is a power in proximity. One of the reasons the National Governors Association works is because we spend time together and we get to know each other as human beings first and as politicians second. And we need more of that in our country today. Now, the other thing that I think is important, this is not just a feel-good thing that we're trying to do. There's actual science behind this. We've been working very closely with groups across the country. We've been working closely with Stanford and Dartmouth and others in their policy labs who have been running experiments on us, trying to learn the science behind depolarization. And you're going to hear more about some of that today. One of the things that they found that worked, and this is part of our initiative, we're going to ask governors all across the country to join us in filming a video, if they will, at least an op-ed, if they can't do that, with someone on the other side of the aisle, another governor, a mayor, a member of Congress, someone you respect in your state or elsewhere who is of the opposing party. To show Americans, see, there's a permission structure in culture, right? And politics is always downstream of culture. We're trying to help culture improve, and we can do that. What they found is that as we do this permission structure, politicians have been giving Americans permission to hate each other. It's up to us to give Americans permission to care for each other again. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And this is one way we can do it. We'll also, Abby and I will be traveling around the country, inviting you to do service projects in your states. Service projects with people, again, across the aisle, because two things that magically happen when we serve others. The first one goes to the initiative of the Murphys. And that is, we learned, if you remember, we had that scientist from UCLA, brain scientist, who told us when we're giving service to other people, when we're volunteering, something magical happens in our brains and our mental health improves. It's as powerful as drugs that help in this area. So it improves our mental health, but it does something else as well. When we're serving other people, it's hard to hate people up close, and it makes us all feel better about each other. So we'll be doing service projects across the country and many other initiatives. We want to help families model this. I believe firmly that there is an exhausted majority out there who are tired of this. Now, as much as I would like to appeal to your better angels as a reason to do this, there is another reason to do it. I think it's good politics. I actually think it's good politics. When everyone else is zigging, we can zag and get a little attention. We are heading into what I believe, again, will be the next most divisive election of our lifetimes, right? An election no one in America is looking forward to. And we as governors have an opportunity to provide some counter-programming to that terrible, the terrible thing that is going to be happening to us. We can give Americans another vision, another option. And I believe they're desperate for it. And I believe that they will reward all of you at the ballot box as well for doing that, all right? Now, I want to show you a little bit about what this is going to look like. Again, my vice chair, Jared Polis, and I got together a few weeks ago. We filmed a little ad, a little video, and we want to show that to you now. I'm Spencer Cox, Republican governor of Utah.
And I'm Jared Polis, Democratic governor of Colorado.
And we're here to help save your family dinners.
You know what we're talking about.
You're halfway through your second helping of mashed potatoes when your MAGA uncle decides to share his thoughts on the latest election conspiracy.
We all have that uncle.
Or instead of passing the salt, your woke niece passes along a particularly controversial fact that she read on social media.
Or maybe you're the one with the strong opinions. You know you're right. And the other side is a bunch of misguided weirdos. But there's a healthy way to deal with conflicting opinions. Actually, it's okay to disagree.
It's not just okay, it's crucial.
Did you just disagree with me about disagreeing?
Healthy disagreement means not assuming that the other side is deluded, misinformed, or actively trying to overthrow America.
A little respect and curiosity keeps resentment off the dinner table.
And out of your social media feeds.
Our nation was founded by people who profoundly disagreed.
So next time your uncle, your niece, or anyone else brings up that one topic that just drives you nuts, take a deep breath.
Be curious, ask questions. If you still disagree, that's okay, but you might find that you aren't as far apart as you think.
Conflict isn't bad. It's the way we disagree that matters. Please join us in showing America the right kind of conflict.
Together,
we can disagree better. Well, let me conclude with this. As I mentioned, Abby and I have been on this historic tour. We visited Liberty Hall. Let me back up. When I was 8 years old, I went to Washington, D.C. for the first time. And I went to the Jefferson Memorial, and I got a book. It was an incredible title. It was called My First Book on Thomas Jefferson. I don't know who came up with the title. Probably the same folks at NGA that named your position, Phil. I loved that book, and I became fascinated. It took me 40 years later to finally make it to Independence Hall. We were there a couple days ago. It was my 48th birthday, and we were there. And as we walked into that room where the Declaration of Independence was debated and signed, and the Constitution of our country was debated and signed, where these sacred documents and moments happened, I wasn't quite prepared for how emotional I would get in seeing that room and imagining those people there and feeling that spirit of patriotism and gratitude for the blood and toil and treasure that so many had sacrificed. And there it was, right in front of me, the chair in which George Washington sat during those hot debates that occurred in Philadelphia. And I was reminded again of the famous story that I know you have all heard of, an aged Benjamin Franklin sitting in the back and looking at that chair for days on end. You remember the story, you remember the chair. On the back of the chair, kind of carved, inlaid into the back, was half of a sun. And over the course of the debates, Benjamin Franklin said, I've looked at that sun many times and trying to decide if it was a rising sun or a setting sun. And at the end, when the Constitution was agreed upon, he said, I'm pleased to report that I can now happily report that it is a rising sun. I think it's fair to ask the question, today, is it a rising sun or is it a setting sun? And I don't think the answer to that question is written in the stars. I don't think it's determined yet. Are our greatest days behind us or our greatest days ahead of us? I truly believe that as governors, together with our fellow Americans and the people that we represent, we can make sure that sun is still rising, that the next 100 years will be 100 years of American greatness, leading the world to make sure that we are preserving those rights that were given to us from on high, that all of us are created equal, and that we can pursue life, liberty, and happiness together as one nation under God, as it was always meant to be. Thank you so much for joining me on this quest. Thank you.